Okay, so today we're diving deep into the life of Dara Shikoh. And I'm already intrigued, like this Mughal prince, his story, it's got all these twists and turns.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
So we've got these excerpts, right, about his life. And I'm thinking our mission here is to like really figure out who he was, what he stood for, and why people still talk about him today.
Absolutely, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, even just his birth, March 20th, 1615, eldest son of Emperor Shah Jahan and, wait for it, Mumtaz Mahal,
Whoa, Taj Mahal fame.
the one and only. And his name, Dara Shikoh, translates to Darius of the Magnificent. So right off the bat, you see that Persian influence.
Oh, for sure. So we're talking a Mughal court steeped in Persian culture, arts, learning, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly.
Okay, but Dara, he wasn't just some prince hanging around. He was involved in, like, administration, even the military. But the sources really highlight his passion for ideas, for exploring different faiths.
Right.
And being born near that Sufi shrine in Ajmer, that's got to be significant.
Oh, hugely significant.
Right.
It really laid the groundwork for his whole spiritual and intellectual journey. He became a devoted follower of the Qadiri Sufi order, with Myanmar and Mullah Shah Badakshi as his main mentors. And we're not talking about some passing interest here. This was deep core to who he was.
Okay, so that's got to fuel some serious intellectual curiosity. The source mentions his education, like Persian literature, Islamic theology, philosophy, but then it also says he got into Sanskrit texts, Hindu philosophy too. I mean, that's a pretty broad education, especially for back then.
Yeah.
How common was it for a Mughal prince to be diving into both Islamic and Hindu thought?
Not common at all. It was quite exceptional, and this is what led him to his central belief: the unity of all religions. He saw these common threads running through all these different traditions.
Which brings us to his big works, right? Like the Majma-ul-Bahrain, the Confluence of the Two Seas. I mean, it's like he's building bridges between these worlds, showing how Islam and Hinduism share these spiritual concepts. Like, what's an example of something he might have pointed to?
Well, he looked at the concept of divine light, for instance. You can find echoes of that in Sufi mysticism and in Hindu ideas of Brahman. And then there's his translation of 50 Upanishads. That's a lot.
Wow, 50.
50. Those are like foundational Hindu texts, about the nature of reality, the self. He translated them into Persian, called it Sir-e-Akbar, the Great Secret. And he believed these texts, they held the essence of monotheism. Pretty bold statement.
Yeah, it is. I mean, just the fact that he translated them, that he believed there was this shared core, that says a lot. But, okay, this wasn't just some ivory tower intellectual pursuit.
Right.
He held some pretty important administrative roles, too, like governor in Kabul, Multan, Allahabad. So he's in the thick of things politically, while also deep in these philosophical and spiritual explorations. And then, boom, the succession crisis hits.
Yep, after Shah Jahan gets sick in 1657.
1657.
Dara, he's in line for the throne, but this war breaks out with his brothers, Aurangzeb, Murad Bakhsh, and Shah Shuja.
It didn't go well for him.
It didn't. His father backed him, but Dara, he relied a lot on alliances, and maybe he wasn't as experienced on the battlefield as, say, Aurangzeb. That played a role.
And then the defeat at the Battle of Sanagar in 1659, that was a turning point.
Decisive one.
And our source, it goes into his capture, the public humiliation in Delhi.
It's a stark contrast.
It really is. And then ultimately, Aurangzeb orders his execution. What a tragic end.
Tragic, but his legacy, it lives on through his writings, through his work, to promote understanding between faiths. He's a symbol of tolerance, especially when you compare him to Aurangzeb. And here's something I find fascinating. Those Persian translations of the Upanishads that he did, they made their way to Europe.
Really?
Yeah, and they ended up influencing European scholars, people like Anquetil Duperron, and that's how Indian philosophy started getting introduced to the West.
So his impact wasn't just limited to India. I mean, thinking about today, his whole vision of unity and coexistence, it feels super relevant.
It does, doesn't it? He's this unique figure in history, so engaged in politics, but also deeply driven by this spiritual quest for understanding across religious divides.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, what if Dara Shikoh's vision of harmony had actually taken root? How would things have been different?
An excellent question.
Something to think about for sure. Thanks for this deep dive.
My pleasure.